My name is Ric Rodriguez. I am co-founder and chief growth officer at a company called Finsu, where we're building a sustainable fashion marketplace. Love SEO, absolute nerd for it, so I'm here to talk to you about entity optimization, or specifically solving the knowledge gap. Exciting, right? For those of you that are super into graph theory and network theory, you'll find this potentially a bit basic. If you're not and you need a refresher, or you just want to hear me whittle on for 20 minutes, then this is the place to be. What was I going to say? I have 84 slides. If we're here by Christmas, that's I'm sorry about that, but also this can go one of two ways. I'm going to speed run it or I'm going to take a long time. So we'll see what we do, right? It doesn't mean I'm going to go very, very fast. I'll share the slides afterwards, and if everyone needs to, if anyone wants to ask any questions or wants to come back and find something, I'll make sure everyone knows where to find this stuff. So we're living in the age of curiosity. People are searching for things in ways they've never searched before. There's lots and lots of things going on. I think we've all probably once in our career presented a slide to a client and or higher ups in the company that looks a bit like this, where you've got keywords, lots and lots of keywords with lots of high volume and high competition that goes down to the long tail down there. You've got head terms, mid tail, and long tail, all pretty standard stuff. And that's great, except 15% of searches are brand new every day. And according to Ahrefs, 95% of all searches that ever happen are less than 20 searches a month too. So ultimately, we've got this incredible, massive long tail of stuff that's out there, which is great, except now you can go to search results, and not only can you get information directly in search results, you can keep searching over and over and over again, and you can find stuff. And then Google comes out with Bard, Bing comes out with ChatGPT, and the whole thing goes batshit crazy. Isn't that wonderful? So I guess the reality is now we're looking at a world where the long tail is actually something like this, where you've got this massive amount of information that has never been searched for before or has such a low demand. You've got this kind of mid-tail, which is where a lot of the research and a lot of the understanding comes from, people kind of getting closer and closer to point of sale that's just messy as fuck. And then you've got these head terms, which are like dresses that no one wants to rank for simply because loads and loads and loads of people search for it and no one's about to no one's going to buy anything from that point anyway. This is all really, really fun. Then we throw another kind of lens at this, which is search is happening in the moment, space, and time. So we often think about rankings and keywords and all these wonderful things. But you can end up with a query that looks a bit like this, and Google isn't looking at this and going, shit, where's a page with all this information? Instead, they're looking at it and going, there's tons and tons and tons of different component parts that make up this query, which is awesome. Except people don't search like that, they search like this, and Google infers absolutely everything from it, from search history, demographic data, your phone, your IP, and all this great stuff to create a set of results that are relevant and useful to you in that moment, space, and time, which is wonderful of them. And the kind of kicker for all of this is, despite us as humans searching in new ways and changing how we're searching, answer engines, or the systems that provide the results, don't actually know what the fuck is going on yet. They don't know what content, what information is right, what information is true, despite all the amazing content we're throwing out there. Why? Well, first things first, the index is not this infinite resource of information. It's a huge cost to Google to maintain, a search engine to maintain. And so the understanding that you by design will be found and indexed and surfaced just because you exist, that's a world we need to adjust and kind of get out of the thinking of, because very simply there is not infinite space anymore. So as Gary was saying that. Another side of things is that even with the information that is out there, search engines are now really starting to struggle to understand determined truth. We put a load of AI content out there, which is taken from machines, based on machines, learning from other machines, and we expect search engines to go, this is accurate. The reality is that entity understanding, or understanding of concepts within concepts, this is from Inlink's great study that these guys did. The reality is that entity understanding, the recognition of concepts within concepts, is really, really low. So what happens when it's really, really low? You have this thing called the knowledge void. This is the opportunity for us as search marketers in my mind. Is it going to go? Cool. In addition to all of this, and I'm trying to show everyone the challenge and why we need to slightly adapt our thinking to how we respond to things and how we create content, is that search engines, as a result of A, the knowledge gap, B, increase the numbers of queries, and everything else that's going on, are now having to approximate results. They're having to approximate what they return to users. So if we take this as a graph, you've got the number of results returned on one axis and the more specific queries. And in fact, let's put we can put some sort of like lengths of query terms on, queries on this, you'd expect to see a distribution that looks like this. So ultimately, a short query would have lots and lots of results because there's lots and lots of information that can be mapped to it. And as you get further down towards the end, as you get to longer queries, the number of results will decline because ultimately there's less information, less directly relevant results that can be returned. Unfortunately, however, it doesn't work like that. For the first set of results, there's lots and lots of information. But as you get further and further down, you start to see results and the number of results increasing, which is crazy. So why is that happening? Simply because search engines don't have the confidence in the results to return like loads and loads of information. They want users to have this amazing search experience, so they approximate. They bring in information from lots and lots of different areas. So if you remember that really, really long query from a moment ago, that might be something we search at the sort of 10, 12, 15 query mark. Instead of returning a result that has that direct answer, they are bringing in lots and lots of results. Now, that might not be at the top of the page, but it's filling out the rest of the SERP, and that's not a ranking opportunity. That's just the information that the search engines have to go on to understand what that user is searching for in that moment of space and time, which I think is really interesting. So what does that mean we got to do? Well, very simply, we've got to not optimize. Like the idea that we would go out and find and try and attune what we're doing to search engines' expectations of what the world looks like is one thing, but if you're telling search engines what they already know, so is everybody else. What we've got to do is we've got to train the systems, because remember, behind a lot of search, there's a lot of machine learning that's based on supervised understanding of what's going on, and we've got to really give them new information that they can use to like level up. So how do we do that? Well, first we have to understand what a search engine and what a knowledge graph really is. So when we talk about graphs, like most people will assume a graph is this, and like it's not a completely unrelated concept, but it is. Like, it isn't really the thing we're looking at. When we're talking about a graph, what we're talking about is this. This is a network, right? Network graph is kind of the same thing. And it's made up of two things. It's made up of vertices and nodes. These are points of data. And then edges, connections, the things that relate the data to each other. And this is an example of a very, very basic graph, right? You've got pasta types. You've got all these things connected. If we go one level deeper, let's look at one of those particular relationships. Let's understand what the components of a particular connection are. You've got three things. You've got a subject, which is the thing in question. You've got the object, the thing it relates to, and the predicate, which is the way that those two things relate to each other. And remember, relationships can be bidirectional, as in a subject can be related to an object, but you could easily switch those two around, inverse the predicate, and then it still makes sense. That's really important. And so in this example, you can see mozzarella cheese used in margherita pizza, parts of Italian culture. This is the basic form of a graph database. One more thing you can do is you can start to attach more specific information to each of the main nodes in this case, in the format of value pairs. So for each subject, you can have lots and lots of information that help understand or help provide more information about each subject and object that when referenced, when queried, can add more value and more information, which means it's a really efficient way to store complex data. In this case, you can see we've got tons and tons of different information that's stored against these things, and this is how the data set works. Remember this thing, structured data, this thing we go out to our devs and talk a lot about, and we sit down as SEOs and we fight and go, we really, really need it. Structured data is ultimately us putting on our website the things, the value pairs that we need to identify different pages of content in a way that's uniform and machine readable, i.e., instead of getting Google, instead of getting search engines to really figure out what the fuck we're talking about, we're telling them exactly what we're doing in a way that they understand. It's a really good thing. It helps them understand and place us in the world that we're in. It's going to be slightly lower. But the reason why you do this the reason why you use a graph is quite simple. Anyone used relational databases before? Awesome. They're great when you've got like one question that you want to ask of one set of data. And like, that's really, really cool. So if you want to know how many students are in a school, you can go to one table and count 1, 2, 3, 4 lines, and that's brilliant. And actually, in this case, if you were to go to a graph database and ask the same question, you could get to the same answer, but it's probably not that efficient. Where this becomes awesome is when you need lots and lots of complex information. Like in this case, you're asking how many GCSE students are female and take maths in a relational database structure, and this is probably the more complex data structure that there are outside of a graph database. You'd have to go to like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, potentially more and more and more tables. Each time you do this requires computational power, makes things slower, makes the understanding process slower. It might be one, who knows? With the graph database, you can go to different nodes, and within each different nodes, you've got different amounts of information being stored, and you can pull that back really, really effectively. So like, why graphs matter and why this is really important is it's a data structure. It's a way of presenting information back to people, things, queries, search engines that allows them to really understand what you're doing and place you in the world, and that's kind of important. And This is all really, really good. But what you've got to remember is any information that we put out into the world, whether structured or unstructured, helps search engines understand what the hell we're going on. That's a great thing, because if you want search engines to know what you're doing and how you do it, you can tell them. It's a bad thing because they trust you if you do, right? Sure, links exist, sure, content exists, but if you become the answer at the top of page, humans trust search engines, and as a result, they're going to keep sharing that information and permeating the myth, truth, whatever you want to put out there. And so what you've got is a world that's completely full of subjectivity. But let's take that graph context and let's extrapolate it into the real world. I'm not a West Ham fan. My friend Dave was in the audience. He is a West Ham fan, hence why I did this. There's a whole bit now that's not going to be relevant to anyone in the room apart from him, and he's not even here, so that sucks. I'm really sad. But like, take West Ham in this instance. So West Ham in this instance could be our subject. And what we're trying to get to is, when did they play? Who did they play on Boxing Day? So we can get to West Ham United by following it through either subject and object relationships and relationships, or we can go, well, West Ham are in these various different things, which are value pairs, which could be entities in their own right, and this is how the world all connects. So when we ask this question, we can follow this through. This is in essence what we're trying to do with entity optimization, except instead of going to our site and figuring out words on the page we can add, think about it this way. How do I create my site to make it as simple and easy to understand on the basis of a machine that is looking for A, things, B, other things, C, how they connect together, and D, any other information we can provide in a really simple and uniform way. This is a great example of how one might do that, where you can take that and apply that to any circumstance, including e-commerce. Another example, if you want to know what aircraft fly out of London, really what we're saying is, on a scale of London to Airbus 321, how do we get there? It's funny though, because this, as you start to think about it, I know I talked about networks being graphs and not graphs. Really what we're saying is, you've got an axis of London and Airbus 321, and you're figuring out the steps on how you get there. All different ways of thinking about this. How am I doing for time? Awesome. Right. This is all wonderful, and this is all great, because we talked a lot about structured information. Structured information is where we tag stuff. This is where we go, right, structured data this, value pair this, awesome. Most of the web isn't structured. Most of the web is just block text and content and images and videos and all this wonderful stuff. So how do the machines learn? Well, anything you put out into the world is a way of machines learning what the hell's going on, right? Your customers, when they review your site, are telling search engines what you do and how you do it, and in a way that they can trust. They have amazing technologies to understand this, But I think for me, the biggest change or biggest kind of seismic shift in this world was the kind of bringing or dawning of context, right? So the idea that machine learning systems or natural language processing can have a true awareness of everything that is going on around it, can understand all the words and all the context around it. I'll come on to that in a moment, to start to inform and to learn, right? This is Lex Fridman back in 2020, talks about context. If you haven't seen this video, it's a really, really good one. So let's take a sentence like this, Hammer's Boxing Day for sale online, just to illustrate what context really matters, or why it matters and what it means. This sentence could mean, as we're all e-commerce marketers, a DIY store, like Hammer, on the Boxing Day, online being the sale event. We always have Boxing Day sales, so this is a pretty good query. And if you search for it, in a traditional way of looking at things, you take the word hammers. This is left to right understanding. You take the word hammers, and then you take the word boxing, and you'd be able to understand the concept of hammers, and then day, and vice versa. And to be efficient, the systems would ignore common words. This all is great, except we haven't actually understood what this query means. So if this was the search query and the results were hammers on a Boxing Day sale, that wouldn't actually result in the user getting a great experience, because that's not what the user's looking for. Why? Because we've misinterpreted the word hammers, because we've not accounted for the word for. So the system that's designed to make things more efficient actually has screwed the system. Does everyone remember BERT? We stopped talking about BERT, didn't we? Yeah. Why? BERT's really cool. It changed this for the better. BERT did a load of cool things, like it takes documents, it takes corpus text, it hides words and tries to guess the missing word, it tries to guess sentences. The reason it does this is because it learns how different words, when they appear, relate to all of the other words around it. Now, if we'd done that in the query in the first instance, we'd have realized that we're actually talking about West Ham tickets, sorry Dave, on Boxing Day, which is when they played, for sale online. Point being that for sale completely flips the meaning of the sentence rather than sale online, as in we're asking to look for something that's on offer as opposed to the offer itself. That's a very nuanced thing, but search engines have now gone from understanding that or not understanding that to completely understanding that. Awesome. The thing to remember here is that this stuff here can be used to understand queries and make better results, but it can also be used to better understand all the content that we're putting out there. So it's not just about having great structured data and having all the information, having an internal linking structure that's amazing. It's about remembering that every single piece of content you put out there can be used to inform and give search engines a much, much better world view of what's going on around us in the world that we're in, which I think is pretty amazing. This isn't something that Google expressly used, but I think it's important to remember that search engines have moved on since BERT. This is KBERT. This is basically them taking the systems, taking the machine learning system, the natural language processing systems that we just discussed, and enriching that information with very, very detailed understandings of particular ontologies, right? If you want to know about cancer, for example, cancer has so many different phrases, words, jargon pieces, documents, and just so much stuff that is very specific to that world. You can take BERT, which is a very, very generic and quite kind of standard set of content or set of understanding, and make it much, much deeper by running it through other places. This is one way that very quickly after BERT came out, we were already enriching what BERT did. Now we're 3 years on, but you can only imagine what this stuff can do. And then the final thing is we know that search engines can now use the detail and the information we're putting out there. But in addition to that, they now have the processing power and the ability to crunch this data in a way they've never had before. This came out in 2020. BERT was 2019. This is a reformer. This is the next level. If BERT took us from going from understanding words to sentences, this takes us from going to sentences to whole fucking novels, right? No one ever talked about this. Again, huge update in the world of machine learning. It allows search engines, and frankly, anyone for that matter, to take what was a very, very resource-intensive process and make it really, really easy. I know that's been a lot of words and quite quickly. Let me land on this point. Why does this matter? Why do we care? Why do we want to do end-to-end optimization? Why don't we just carry on doing what we're doing? Because actually, this is about two things. One, this is about making our businesses as much money as we can and growing. And secondly, this is where we start talking about the things like the integrity of the web and the information that we're putting out there. Because we've got to remember, as search marketers, we have a responsibility to keep the information in the web as clean as possible and to make it as useful as possible. If we don't do that, search engines are learning subjectively from everything that's out there. If we don't help support that and we don't put clean information out there, we don't make it relevant and useful, people will trust it regardless, and that's quite a dangerous thing. For example, there's been lots of studies that say, well, do people trust search engines information? And they do, on the whole they do. But what's getting more and more frightening is the younger demographics are becoming more and more interested in search engines and trusting of them. Because you've got to remember, the younger generations have never really grown up in a world where this hasn't been around. They've just always gone and Googled information. This is great. This is an amazing study. But the thing is, this starts at the 18 to 25 age group. Now think about the generation behind it. Think about Alpha. They've grown up in a world where not only has Google, they've always had Google, they're in a world where they've always had Facebook and potentially Snapchat. And you go to Beta, they've always had TikTok. So this is where we start, this is where things get a bit scary a bit quickly. So for us, this is really important. Two reasons. One, integrity of the web. I'm a huge advocate for that. Secondly, we all like making money for our businesses. These guys are about to go through the largest generational transfer of wealth that's ever happened in the history of mankind and frankly the history of the planet. It's going to skip the millennial generation. So if you want to optimize and you want to get these people into your business and want to get them used to what you're doing, as much as it's important for us to focus and build great technically sound sites and have amazing content, it is, trust me, if you don't build an amazing information strategy which is based on, number one, amazing data clarity and cleanliness, that means having value pairs, making sure that you're using structured data, making sure you've got a site that is architectured well. And by the way, the business case is this, right? This is how you connect with these people. If you don't do that, you're simply not going to be landed in front of these people at the moment of space and time they need to engage with your brand so they become lifelong customers. This is the battleground, right? The knowledge void is the place to where we're going to start fighting. It's not about the top of the page anymore. It's not about position one. It's about Google coming to your site and trusting you as an explicit answer to queries, regardless of how those queries happen. And this is the way to do it. And look, this sounds a bit crazy. This isn't a future idea. It's kind of already here. Some of these slides are a year old. Some of them are even longer. Point being, this is an idea that's been around for many, many times. There are studies out there from 2016 that show the impact of structured data and entity recognition and learning on search. As a community, I think we've been slower to embrace it because it's really hard. You have to learn about machine learning, which most people do that have degrees and doctorates and these kind of things on. The thing is, the information is all out there. There are patents, there are research documents, there are some incredible people on Twitter that you can follow that are already talking about this. And if we don't make these changes happen, the web is just going to become this complete mess that we aren't going to be able to do anything with, which as search marketers is a real shame because that's what we rely on. And secondly, as people, it's not really a great place to be either. But I think we have the power to change it. So that's me. Thank you very much. Hope it was interesting. Thanks for it.